Well, good evening, everybody. I'll get started. It looks like with the numbers of participants are stabilised at about 65, so that's not a bad turnout for tonight. Thank you for all turning up. Some quick guidelines as per previous. Everyone should be muted until the end question session. Please use the chat box for questions during the webinar. There may be a few breaks where I will try and answer a few of the relevant questions. Please keep the questions relevant. I might not be able to answer all of them at the same time. When I first started doing the webinars, I decided that I was going to try and do them on a 6-monthly basis. Earlier this year, there were a few distractions, propellers coming off aeroplanes, fin flutter events, things like that of an exciting nature, which was sufficient that I missed out early this year. So this time is going to be a 2-part webinar. Tonight we will cover the current health of the airworthiness system as we come out of the COVID lockdowns, and some of the current projects surrounding the implementation of the Guiding Australia Strategic Plan. There's a second webinar on next Wednesday night, that's Wednesday the 12th, and I will go through the ever popular recent incidents that have airworthiness aspects and recent defect reports. So the current health of the airworthiness system, the finances over the last couple of years have been surprisingly robust, particularly when COVID first hit. I thought that there was going to be a sharp drop in the number of aircraft having annual inspections. On the screen there is a chart of the finances over the last 6-7 years. Income is the solid line. The dashed orange line is what comes from Form 2 kit sales, and that represents around 80 to 85% of the income for the airworthiness department. There's been a decrease over the last 2 years in expenses, but that is primarily from the COVID restrictions, meaning that people weren't going out to the clubs and doing airworthiness audits, and so there weren't any cost reimbursements to those people for those audits. That means we now have quite a large audit backlog, and I already know, because I've authorised the expense, there's going to be quite a bit of playing catch up over the next 12 months in that audit backlog. There's going to be a bit of a spike in the expenses column there. The other steady decline you see since about 2017, 2018 year, that's really a failure of the GFA Airworthiness Department to spend money. We're not getting our projects done, and that's a failure towards the members, where we're letting the members down by not completing the projects that we set out to do. Many people will be staring at the gap saying, well, why is there such a discrepancy between the amount that we earn and the amount that we spend? The expenses are what is directly billed to the Airworthiness Department. This doesn't include some stuff that is technically an airworthiness expense. The office staff do a lot of airworthiness work. Around about 50% of their time could be construed to be airworthiness work, and that is not billed to the Airworthiness Department. That goes into the office expenses. There's also some IT expenses. The online database that we use in airworthiness is called Salesforce. The licenses for that are reasonably pricey. I have attempted in previous years to see how well the numbers balance out, and it's not too bad once you start factoring in the cost of the office staff, the cost of the IT licenses and so forth, some of those costs that are attributed to other departments. Over the last couple of years, there's been a surprising increase in the number of new aircraft arriving in the country. Notably, we have 4 brand new electric self-launched single-seat aircraft arriving late this year, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on, which has, with the initial C of A costs, increased the income significantly in the airworthiness department. A quick look at the number of Form 2 kit sales. 2019, end of 2019, we had the bushfires on the East Coast and the start of the COVID lockdowns. The combination of the bushfires in particular, followed by the COVID lockdown, saw quite a drop in the number of Form 2 kits sold, and that kicked off at the time the bushfires happened. And that led me to expect that the 2021 financial year and the 21-22 financial year were going to be substantially lower than what they are, and I was very pleasantly surprised at the robustness of the numbers that we sold there. The delta from the around that 740 mark down to the 720, 725 mark is largely due to overseas owners, so aircraft that are owned by people from overseas not getting Form 2 kits done. They're not coming over to the country because they weren't allowed in, which was around 20 odd sailplanes. I expect this year we will recover a lot of that and we'll get back towards that 740 mark. The sales this year got off to a very good start. One of the features we saw over the last 2 years was people buying Form 2 kits earlier than what would normally be expected. So there's now quite a peak in that May, June, July timeframe, followed by a lesser amount sold in August and September than what we would normally expect. At present, that bulge in, or the excess sales in May through to July has put us ahead of the curve in terms of cumulative Form 2 kit sales, and I'm fairly confident we'll stay ahead of that curve for the rest of the year. One of the little studies I did was in the usage of aircraft over the last couple of years. I've previously used what's best described as a life average, so the total numbers of hours for a particular aeroplane divided by the number of years it's been in around the place, and it showed quite a significant shift in usage patterns over the years, where traditionally you would have had syndicates of maybe 3 or 4 people. Each of those people may have been doing 40, 50 hours a year, and the sailplane would have been doing quite a large number of hours, 150, 200 hours a year. We're now seeing syndicates of 2 people, or a lot more private ownerships, single owners, and they're still doing their 50 hours a year. So we're seeing an increase in the number of aircraft doing less hours and a decrease in the number of aircraft doing large amount of hours as a result. The green line is the 2017 to 2019 as an average over those 3 years. In 2020, the first of the real COVID years, we saw a shift to the left, quite an increase in the number of aircraft doing very few hours. The first data point there is a combination of aircraft from 0 to 25 hours. So there's quite a shift where there's aircraft not doing very much, sitting around. Now that was really quite noticeable, that some restrictions were quite different across the country to others. Some areas were locked down a lot longer than others, and some regions were hardly affected whatsoever. I haven't crunched the 2021 data just yet because there's still quite a gap in that. You would have seen a number of emails from me in recent times, mostly because we found a couple of glitches in the system when I first started sending those emails out. Over the last couple of years, people have been increasingly forgetful to send in the Form 2 return. This data is important to Guiding Australia. It is important to the Airworthiness Department. I mentioned this previously in 2021, and the trend is getting worse. The number of returns we're getting and when we're getting it is decreasing. I don't know whether this is due to COVID brain fog or just people getting older. However, it's led to the result that we're now going to be sending out an automatic reminder message if you haven't returned the Form 2 return after 6 months since the Form 2 kit was purchased. The data stats suggest that over 90% of annual inspections are signed off by 6 months after that purchase date, but we're seeing only around 60% of those have had a return. So there's 30% of those still outstanding at the moment. Please be aware that this is an automatic reminder. It is going to the registered operator. It is the registered operator's legal responsibility to ensure the Form 2 is carried out correctly and that the kit is, the Form 2 return is sent back. Most of the problems occur where the registered operator is expecting the annual inspector to return the Form 2 return for them, and there is some miscommunication as to whether that's been done or not. And so anyway, there's going to be a reminder sent out. It's automatic. Please do not get upset at the office staff if the Form 2 has not yet been done. I realise that 10% of annual inspections is about 70 to 75 people out there who will not have done the annual inspection by then. It is not harassment. It's not a hurry up. Please don't take it out on the office staff. If you have a problem with that, please come and contact me. On chat, why not just send out the green book only after you get the return? That's exactly what we're doing at the moment. People are not getting the new Form 2 kit until the Form 2 return from the previous year has been sent in, which is why you get that little uptick in the graph at the 12-month mark. People are starting to order their Form 2 kit 11 months out, so 1 month prior to the Form 2 being due, and then finding that they've forgotten in previous years. I expect that once we get the data in, you'll find that there'll be quite a massive uptick in the 11 to 12-month mark on that dark blue line there. Airworthiness ratings. There was a lot of problems with trying to do airworthiness courses while there were COVID restrictions in place. There has been a number of airworthiness courses run in various regions over the last few months. Component replacement numbers are relatively static. A lot of these people get made up into annual inspectors within 12 to 24 months. Notably, and it is a concern, that we've got 0 women with component replacement as their highest airworthiness rating, and still very low numbers of inspectors who are younger than 40. Now, I think when I looked at the numbers, we had maybe 1 or 2 juniors in that category, under 25. So that young age group is again another area of concern. Annual inspector numbers are relatively static. Minor repairs, we're not running that many minor repair courses each year. We're seeing a slow decrease in the numbers as people move out of the system due to age. I'm quite surprised that the major repairs has been as static as it is. I thought we would be seeing a similar decline in numbers, in the number of people with major repairs as people age, pass on, or just move away from gliding. Weight and balance, that continues to be my bugbear. CASA have knocked back the application for weight and balance yet again. I'm having a meeting with them next week to discuss that. It doesn't look like that it's a significant problems to overcome, but we just want to iron out those bugs and get that through. I'm disappearing overseas for a few weeks in the middle of November, and I want to try and get it done and dusted prior to my departure overseas. Otherwise, it'll be waiting till sometime next year, which has been dragging on for so long. Engine routine inspection numbers are pretty static. Replacement of components has actually increased. I know there was a course being run in Western Australia recently, and that is good to see. Engine minor overhaul and major overhaul relatively static, and refinishing. We tend to see that's more to do with some people deciding not to be members and then rejoining after a certain period of time. Some of those is really just depends on who's a member when I measure the numbers as opposed to anything else. And the number of AMOs is relatively static. I know that there's 2 clubs that are getting their workshops to become AMO, so hopefully that number will increase to 19 in the not too distant future. MOSP 3 is being reviewed as part of our Part 149 submission. The major change there is a little shift in some of the powers and authorities. The CAD and DCAD positions are going to be largely about policy, and the powers to issue ratings is going to be devolved to the CTO position. Pretty much Part 149 wants 1 person in charge and not too many cooks, not too many chiefs effectively. 1 person in charge, that's it. The question of Jenny is CAD question mark, the chair of the Airworthiness department, and the DCADs. Is there anything else there, Jenny? No, I'll leave it for a moment. Also taking the opportunity to make a number of improvements as part of that BSE review. A number of mandatory servicing requirements were in BSE. They're being moved into a chapter in MOSP 3. They're for the hoteliers and the TOST releases. Remember that MOSP 3 is mandatory. BSE is advisory only. All of the current MTARs are being incorporated into MOSP 3. There's been a number of suggested changes and amendments from members, which I'm working on at the moment, and quite a few formatting and typo corrections being patched in there as well. If you have any changes you want to see or would like to suggest about MOSP 3, now is exactly the right time to be putting those suggestions into me. Basic sailplane engineering is also getting a revision at the same time. As I mentioned, the removal of the mandatory service requirements is going into MOSP 3. I'm taking out the wood and fabric repair section and turning that into a standalone manual. So BSE will be about servicing aircraft. The wood and fabric repair manual will be for, as it says, the repair of vintage aeroplanes. At some point, I'll be interested in creating a FRP repair manual. That's going to be a long-term goal, I suspect. So we'll have a number of standalone repair manuals and BSE. There's, again, a number of suggested changes from members. So, if you have some recommendations for changes to BSE, now is a pretty good time to get them in. Plenty of formatting and typo corrections. The recent radio and the hotelier chapters are being integrated. I'm trying to draft a chapter on crash worthiness. I think it's an important topic that's missing in the current version of BSE. We dance around it a bit with the installation of optional equipment and the pull tests required for the various G-forces. And I am taking the opportunity to reorder the chapters into a more logical sequence. The chapter numbering's gotten a little jumbled over the years. Everything's going to be pivoting around chapter 16, which is the chapter for releases. That way, if you've been signing out sailplane logbooks saying that the TOST release has been serviced in accordance with chapter 16 of BSE, you won't have to change your logbook entries. From the chat, what time frame? I'm looking at getting this done over the next 4 weeks. If you can get any recommendations into me over the next fortnight, that'd be great. Remember, I'm disappearing in mid-November. If I can't get it done by the time I depart, it will have to stay on the back burner till I get back in early in the new year. Audits. Many of you know that CASA is moving to a risk-based approach for their audits. Gliding Australia is looking at doing the same. This is going to be in conjunction with Ops and Drew McKinney as the safety manager, and we'll be developing that sometime in 2023. We had the first face-to-face meeting of the Airworthiness Department that was hosted in Melbourne back in June. We discussed some ideas about this. We were looking at potentially, and this is potential, extending the audit period out to 4 years for low-risk clubs, subject to perhaps a bit of internal reporting and monitoring of some performance indicators. The big question is going to be, how do you determine the level of risk? Very well aware that there's a very wide range of clubs and operations out there, and that a one-size-fits-all approach won't work. So there's going to have to be a little bit of ifs and buts and maybes in this. It's going to be an interesting period of time as we work this out. We definitely want to have a consistent approach between operations and airworthiness. We'll see what happens next year. I'll push pause here for a second and give people opportunities for any questions in chat if they've got them. And I'll note that we're up to 74 people attending at the moment, which is excellent. Survey ratings wasn't noted. I did mention some of the survey ratings. Oh, actually, I didn't mention survey ratings, did I? I'll have to go back and have a look at the numbers. Thank you. I'll have a look at that for next time. Make a note of that. Any idea how long you expect the meeting to take? Which meeting is this one going to be? My meeting with CASA. My meetings with CASA take some time occasionally. This meeting. I expect it'll go for another half hour, perhaps, depending on how much discussion there are on the next section. All right, I'll keep on kicking on. I mean, this is being recorded. I will get this put up onto YouTube as soon as I can. It'll probably be up sometime later tomorrow, maybe early Friday, if you have to depart. So the Gliding Australia strategic plan, you can find it in the documents section on the website under administration and admin docs. The strategic plan identifies 8 key goals. These were build and promote an external profile for Gliding Australia, to grow participation, inclusiveness and diversity, to increase participation in cross-country competition and high-performance soaring, build and implement an enhanced safety culture, build club and regional capability and sustainability, develop and manage effective systems for clubs, members and regions. Got that name the wrong way, members, clubs and regions. Create a culture of fellowship, fun and enjoyment, and develop a modern and innovative sport. Just keeping an eye on chat here, so yes. To where the slides will be available, yes, I can make those slides available. Not a lot there that really fits in with airworthiness stuff, but we'll see how we go. And if you have any ideas along the way, please email me with some suggestions. So building and promoting an external profile. One of the long-term goals we've had is trying to engage with, particularly with universities that do aerospace engineering. We think that things like annual inspector courses, or where you can get your hands on an aeroplane, minor FRP repair courses could be used as an elective subject for undergrad students. Since we've discussed that, there is also a possibility that we could provide minor FRP repair courses to CASA LAME type people and fabric repair courses to CASA LAMEs. To achieve this, we will need to have a fairly robust syllabus or syllabi. We'll also need to have some pretty good instructors with good instructional technique and some pretty good workshops to work in to achieve this. So there's a few things there that we need to work on to be able to sell this to these external bodies as being a professional and professional product that we offer. I will note that CASA already openly tells me when I'm having the meetings with it, we are considered to be a centre of excellence for FRP repair. And with the number of the old-time lamies moving out of the CASA system, we're now also the centre of excellence for fabric repair, with a number of CASA workshops now engaging with gliding people to do fabric repair on GA aircraft. So there's great potential there. What we need to do is get quite professional with our application of these courses and sell a very professional product if we want to try and do this. I'll talk a bit more about electric self-launch or electric sustainer sailplanes later on, but one of the ways that we can build our external profile is make presentations on when we have this new technology arriving in the country. So organisations like Engineers Australia, Royal Air Society and similar, I think would be great avenues for making presentations to them about this new and emerging technology as it arrives. Making partners with men's sheds. Most of the clubs are men's sheds. Yes, that's one of the problems, I think, in getting some of the women involved. I know that some people have already tried to engage with local men's sheds, and it's very, very, very highly dependent on local interests. I'll talk about electric training later on, then just jumping across the chat. So again, it's going to depend very much on whether the local men's shed has particularly got any kind of interest in aviation and getting involved or not. Growing participation, inclusiveness and diversity. We've been trying for the last couple of years to get a juniors airworthiness course up and running, and similarly with a women's airworthiness course that ran smack bang into COVID. We trialled delivering theory via webinar to the juniors, and we got through that reasonably well, and that was reasonably well accepted. When it came to doing the practical side of things, that all fell over with COVID restrictions, and we had to try and get that stood back up again, trying to get things reorganised. With the women's airworthiness course, I sourced a whole expressions of interest from quite a range of people. We certainly had the numbers to run a course in Victoria and a course in New South Wales. Again, that ran smack bang into COVID problems, and again, trying to get that stood back up. One of the RTOAs, John Warrington, has volunteered to, and Kath Conway have volunteered to try and get that back up and running again and see how that progresses. Note that I am quite concerned that we currently have no women with the component replacement course, replacement of components as their highest airworthiness rating. Replacement of components is the growth step into being an annual inspector. That concerns me greatly, that we have no people coming up through the ranks. Also note that when I'm talking about the younger people coming up through the ranks in terms of airworthiness ratings, I'm cheating a bit here and saying inspectors less than 40 years old. And remembering that juniors are lower than 25, I think, off the top of my head. So I'm cheating there in that even with expanding the age group out to 40, we've still only got 15 inspectors, or annual inspectors across the country in that what you would call the younger age group around the place. That is also a worry. The mention with Kath Conway, yes, John Warrington and Kath Conway have both offered to assist with trying to get a women's airworthiness course up and running. So yes, it's certainly on the to-do list. My to-do list is enormous at the moment. I'm trying to delegate that down as much as possible, remembering that the people below are equally volunteers, and they have time constraints as well. Back on chat, what about Kath Conway as qualified? Yes, she's an annual inspector, so she's included in the 11 annual inspectors. The component replacement, I run this as the people with the where their highest rating is a replacement of components. Annual inspector trumps replacement of components. So if you have an annual inspector rating, you're included in those numbers. Increased participation in cross-country and high-performance soaring. Not really an airworthiness specific area, but we will look at putting promotion articles in various communications to members, the magazine, the website, how to set your airplane up for optimal performance in competition, how to seal aeroplanes, things like that. You can probably get a number of those on kinds of articles on repeat and just cycle them through every 5 or 6 years. Improving the pilot maintenance training. This also falls into the DI training as well, which I'll talk about a little bit further on. Improving the pilot maintenance training to enable better pilot self-support. What we want to try and achieve is having pilots who can look after all of the day-to-day kinds of problems with their sailplane until it comes up to the annual inspection. So we want to try and improve the syllabus for the pilot maintenance aspect of daily inspection and broaden it a bit to include additional items like repair of this cosmetic or superficial damage, chips to the gel coat or chips to the paint, things like that. Once we've defined the syllabi, develop training packages, roll out that training. And the other one is improve sections of BSE to start to include generic how-to guides for some of these pilot maintenance tasks so they can refer people back to BSE. At the moment, BSE is very good in having theory of how things work, not necessarily so great in how-to at the moment. Now, won't necessarily be in the current revision I'm working on at the moment, but certainly into the future there'll be further revisions of BSE to start trying to include these kinds of information. So this is a draft that we're playing with at the moment, so it's very draft. GPC Unit 42 is for daily inspection, so that would be the first row, if this comes to pass, would be the first row there. GPC Unit 42 will cover daily inspection, preparing the sail plane for operations, inspecting it for ongoing airworthiness, and to be able to do independent inspection of control connections. Included there, engine daily inspection. There's some guidance there on what that includes, none of which actually involves electric stuff at the moment. That's still under development. And then we move down into pilot maintenance. Where I feel the system is lacking at the moment is people are being taught reasonably well how to do daily inspection, but daily inspection also then enables people to do these pilot maintenance tasks, and we don't have a lot of training provided to people to be able to do this. So we want to expand the information available, PowerPoint packages, training packages, things like that, on how to do some of these things. How to change wheels, tubes and tyres and skids, and what are some of the hazards, adjusting the brakes, replenishing the brake fluids, changing out instruments that are not part of the pedostatic system. I mentioned the superficial damage, the repairs of chips, scratches to gel coat and paint, polishing scratches out of canopies. Oxygen, very much something that I'm very wary of. Oxygen is not benign. It's got a lot of hazards and risks associated with it, and I'm pretty sure our oxygen training is pretty remiss at the moment. I've come from an Air Force background with P3 Orions. You can Google A09-300, which is a P3B that had an oxyfire in the cockpit, and it had the fuselage totaled as a result. So brought up, with a professional background and being very, very wary of oxygen and what some of the adverse outcomes can be as a result. Moving on, building and implementing an enhanced safety culture. Been talking extensively about improving the daily inspection training. This is the GPC Unit 42, so the inspection of aircraft, developing the training slide set, developing the handbook, and looking towards developing an online exam similar to the biennial flight review. It's an interesting concept. We'll see how that works out. There's a new version of the daily inspection handbook now available on the website for you to peruse. One thing that I haven't included in this slide is sometime next year we'll be talking with operations and again Drew McKinney, and trying to integrate the source system with the defect reporting system and make it one system. And try and improve that to be a world-class reporting system. People who have seen some of the airworthiness incident reports of late can see that they're very heavily into a no-blame culture and trying to put in place reasonable rectifications for events that are reported to us. I'm reasonably sure that there's a lot of incidents and defects that go under the radar and are not reported. And I'd really like to improve the reporting culture because it really does enhance the safety outcomes for the organisations. Looking at chat, yes, oxygen is important. We don't have specific training. I think we've had a number of near misses, believe it or not, with oxygen events in the past from some anecdotes I've heard. Another comment there about experiencing an oxygen welding regulator explosion. Yes, that would be great if you could write that up as an example of how to be careful around oxygen. Pilots are allowed to do most of those pilot maintenance tasks that I mentioned at the moment. There's been a few changes. Have a look in BSE and MOSP 3. I can't quote the chapters to you at the moment. It is specified in MOSP 3 what you are and are not allowed to do with a daily inspector's ticket. The pilot maintenance tasks, I think, are very poorly trained at the moment. Most of the training is very focused on the aircraft inspection side of things rather than the pilot maintenance activities, which is one area that we really want to improve. GFA's focus on competition soaring rather than local recreation was challenged at a recent ITP workshop. Yes, it's possible that the I hope this is not the case. Look, there's no difference in the airworthiness standards whether you're in a recreation or a competition. They're both the same. I certainly hope that there's not a change and not a difference in airworthiness standards between clubs and competitions in aircraft. What the goal was to try and look at how airworthiness can encourage people to do cross-country, high-performance soaring, things like that. It's not an area that airworthiness typically gets involved in, but the few points I brought up there were what we could think of at the time. Building club and regional capability and sustainability. Interesting one. When we had the meeting in Melbourne, we discussed widely whether or not we could generate wider recognition for annual inspectors. By doing so, encourage more people to become annual inspectors. We mooted the idea of developing a badge or a pin similar to some of the soaring badges we have as annual inspector, as a form of recognition. We will be presenting high quality course certificates to annual inspectors and other significant airworthiness ratings. Consider looking at developing a clothing line, a polo or a hoodie with iFix sailplanes. A bit more of that's coming up. Gaining national recognition of sailplane inspector as a trade. Again, trying to look at what we can do there. It's a pretty small trade, or a pretty small area at the moment. What that would enable, if it got national recognition as a trade, it would enable AMOs to gain access to state and federal funding for apprenticeships. There's a bucket of money out there which people can tap into, which would enable further airworthiness training at a professional level. But first we need to try and jump through the hoops on getting that national recognition and trying to work out where to start with that. Dennis Stacey's been putting a bit of work into that at the moment. We'll work on that further. Improving AMO sustainability. Conversation we're having between the President, myself and the Treasurers, looking at whether GFA can put together an insurance scheme for AMOs. So the levy for that would come out of the AMO levy. So we'll see if we can make a better deal for the AMOs financially by doing that and make their business a bit more sustainable. A couple of ideas that I sketched up as sort of concept art, particularly again on the left-hand side, aiming at the ladies. I fix sailplanes as a hoodie or a shirt design, something like that. On the right-hand side, some kind of logo, bumper sticker, whichever you want to call it. Need to work on that a little further using the marketing hashtag extraordinary skills. Trying to look at, hey, I've got some skills that make aeroplanes airworthy. Looking back at chat, The refresher training is being run by the RTOAs. Please contact your local RTOA to see when they're next scheduling their next courses. I know that in some regions they were doing it on a club by club basis. Again, in this post-COVID world, some clubs were a bit worried of having outsiders come into their club, and they were certainly hosting refresher training for their club only. So please, the RTOAs are not psychic. Please contact them and explain that you need a refresher training and when the next course is being run. Develop and manage effective systems for members, clubs and regions. Yes, we are looking at modernising the airworthiness training. All of the syllabi are being reworked gradually to being outcome-based. That's in progress. Updating all the airworthiness manuals, that's ongoing at the moment. Developing online learning packages, that's going to be a long-term thing. Yes, we are looking at trying to put together Zoom-style webinars for theory. We trialled it with the juniors airworthiness course that got sort of shut down halfway through. It seemed to work really quite well. I even heard of some people who had taken the recording and were playing it back as an audio recording in their car as they were driving to work each day, trying to absorb a bit more information that way by using it as a bit of a audio book style thing. So yes, looking at trying to develop online delivery, need to try and break that down into modules. So perhaps developing a few modular tests to include at the end of these packages, don't know yet, working on it. Looking back at chat, with doing webinars, again, I'm reliant on the RTOAs to do the refresher training. If the RTOAs want to do a webinar, that's up to them. I need to delegate that down to them at the moment. Certainly my current workload with Part 149, Part 103, BSE rewrites, MOSP 3 rewrites, and there was a significant accident on Friday with a Nimbus 3T, resulted in a successful bailout, but that now looks like it's got some airworthiness implications. But please contact your local RTOA, and if you want to try it by webinar, see if they're willing to host it by webinar. Moving back onto the slides, creating a culture of fellowship, fun and enjoyment. Not too much I can do on this at a national level, but yeah, we're going to try and encourage clubs to have barbecues at maintenance weekends and events. Now, I attended a airworthiness mentoring event at a local club in South Australia over the weekend. And whilst we didn't have a barbecue at it, we went down to one of the local pubs for dinner, and that was a pretty successful weekend. I think everyone enjoyed themselves and got a fair bit done. Developing a modern and innovative sport. Electronic instruments is the big one here. I have gone to Ostiv and asked them to consider developing a standard which is cheaper and easier to implement than the TSO which is used currently for certifying aircraft instruments. So this Ostiv standard would be for sailplane electronic instruments. My chats with CASA have indicated that CASA would accept an Ostiv standard as an alternative to a TSO for electronic instruments, things like that. And that would then open the door then that if sailplane avionic OEMs adopted this Ostiv standard, if it's developed, that all these electronic altimeters, airspeed indicators, multi-function indicators could then be used as primary instruments. In saying that, that's probably going to take a little while, remembering that AusDiv is a volunteer organisation, just like most of GFA. If you want to get involved with AusDiv, you can look them up on the website and contribute to that if you would like. It also needs the sailplane instrument avionic OEMs to get on board with that as well. At the moment, I think most of them are doing pretty much like a typical glider pilot, their own thing, their own way, to their own standard. I continue to negotiate with CASA about the use of non-TSO'd instruments. I think we've got some room on non-TSO'd altimeters, providing we don't go into controlled airspace. We've already got a permissible on serviceability where, providing we don't go into controlled airspace, we can skip the altimeter calibration. So in my mind, that's going to be a very similar outcome as if you had a non-TSO'd instrument. So your accuracy might be a little suspect, perhaps, in CASA's eyes. We've got a foot in the door there. I'll need to set up another meeting and discuss that further with CASA. And again, new technology coming onto the scene is electric self-launch and electric sustainer. There's a lot of work that needs to be done there with airworthiness ratings in that area. So we have several new electric self-launch due to arrive later this year. There's one AS34ME, there's 3 electric JS3s due shortly. We already have one Taurus Electro in the country, and there's several Fezzers kicking around. So far, we've been reliant on members getting factory training. So people have gone across to other countries to get trained up on these systems. Looking at how we can try and set up in-country training for these electric self-launch and sustainer systems. One way that I'm looking at the moment is to get representatives from these manufacturers to come over to Australia and to provide training to the RTOAs and the AMOs, and if there is room, anybody else we can squeeze in on these engines or motor systems. And that would cover engine routine inspection, ROC, minor and major overhaul, and also establish where we fit those boundaries with respect to electric motor systems. Electric motors being very simple, very reliable, the problem's all in the batteries. So far, had reasonable responses from some manufacturers, looking at sponsoring them, using a bit of GFA funding to help keep the cost down to get these people over here. More news on that as it develops. The wait and see on that one, but it's looking promising at the moment. A reminder that electric self-launch is not without risk. New Zealand recently released an accident report into a fatal in-flight fire on a Taurus Electro, which occurred on the 7th of December 2020. The report was inconclusive, but did list a possible cause was the operator not following the pipistrel recharging protocols on the batteries. The accident report is there, but if you do a Google search on ZK Golf Echo Lima accident report for New Zealand, something like that, you'll find it very, very quickly. The big problem there is lithium battery fires are notoriously difficult to extinguish. With the fire triangle, you have the heat, the oxygen and the fuel all in the one device. Once it gets hot, the oxygen is provided by the breakdown of the battery electrolyte. If the battery's short-circuiting, that's internally, that's causing the heat. So you have the heat, the oxygen and the fuel all in one neat combined little package. And has a bad habit of reigniting once it has been successfully extinguished. Most emergency services now are simply trying to isolate the vehicle from everything else and preventing the fire from spreading and letting the battery burn itself out. So the big questions there for electric self-launch are, can you remove the batteries for recharging? Are you recharging these in a separate area away from the aircraft and the fuel? This, of course, means you've now got a risk of dropping or damaging the batteries through mishandling and introducing internal damage that way. Are you recharging the batteries in the sailplane? Are there other sailplanes in the hangar? The big fear here is another Lake Keepit event where a whole hangar full of aircraft burnt down. Now, admittedly, that was arson and a deliberate act, but it would be really quite tragic if you had 4 or 5 aircraft in the one hangar and there was a battery fire and it totaled 5 aircraft, 4 or 5 aircraft. Also, a big concern is if you have an electric self-launch in your workshop during an annual inspection or similar, what are you going to do if it catches fire? Interesting question. So these are some of the thoughts that are going through my head as we start to look down how to do electric ratings. Just how do you do a daily inspection on an electric self-launch aircraft? What are you looking for? What are the indications of a problem and so forth? What are you looking for during annual inspection? Just what degree of component replacement is available? What do we include in the replacement of components rating? What does a minor overhaul of an electric system look like? These are all well defined for internal combustion engines, but these are all very prominent questions we need to think about for electric self-launch. So I'll go to questions. I'll cut back across to the chat column. Yes, I believe there is a Ventus Fez retrofitted. I don't think it's registered yet or operating yet. At the moment, I did have a chat with the registered operator of that aeroplane recently, and we were discussing ways of how that aircraft was going to get its CFA or experimental certificate. That's still being worked on. It's not being operated at the moment. One for the instruments, a tangent, electronic conspicuity devices. Yes, linked to other instruments. I have been having discussions with manufacturers of these electronic conspicuity devices, particularly ADS-B. It's looking like a lead in a couple of years' time. We are likely to get an all-in-one device that combines FLARM with ADS-B in and ADS-B out. Now, CASA want ADS-B out for their side of the house. What we would really like is an all-in-one system that does ADS-B in with FLARM as well as ADS-B out. When such a device becomes available, particularly for the Australian FLARM frequencies, I will be approaching the federal government trying to get some kind of grant money such that we can reduce the cost of purchasing and installing these things. I think having an all-in-one device is going to be of major benefit, particularly for clubs that have a lot of RAOs traffic or regional public transport traffic, either at their airfield or through their local airspace. Unfortunately, no such device exists at the moment. The nearest we have is Sky Echo, and that doesn't do Australian FLARM frequencies. There is apparently a patch that we can do to get it to talk and display all in one device. It's a bit of a workaround. That's in the future. I believe some people have successfully applied to the CASA grant. I think the CASA grant was a little bit premature for our needs. Now, noting that when CASA informed Gliding Australia about the grant, sports aviation were not included in that, and CASA did a lot of work at the last minute to get sports aviation included. I think it's a little bit premature, and the technology wasn't quite available for what really suits our needs. Back onto batteries. Yes, if a glider full of lithium batteries catches fire, run away and call 000 and move upwind. Yeah, that's probably much the best you can do. You're not going to be able to fight the fire. And a little handheld fire extinguisher might buy you enough time to evacuate the building, but that's about it. Electric system combined with oxygen would be an interesting mix. Yes, from a distance. That's going to happen. People are going to buy these aircraft and have oxygen systems installed. Everything's fine until it catches fire. The grant was a bit late for our needs till the cost. I think for some people who had previously invested in Sky Echo or something similar, yes, I think it really, the technology is not quite available for the full integration of ADS-B into FLAM at the moment. It's unfortunate. CASA went ahead with their safety case and pushed it through. CASA, for their own reasons, went with the ADS-B out requirement. We really operate on see and avoid, and for us, having ADS-B in like Power FLAM or FLAM Fusion works better for us. So, are there any other questions? I'll stop the share at the moment. Alrighty. Bear with me. I will see if I can work out how to unmute people on all of this. I think I had this here somewhere. Maybe not. I haven't used this for a little while, so please bear with me. I'm not seeing the unmute control there. So please continue with using the chat if you've got any questions. All right, well, I think that's it for the night. I haven't seen any further questions roll in. Next week is going to be the ever popular accidents, incidents and defect reports. As I mentioned, there was the bailout of an Nimbus 3T on Friday. There's news just to hand as it appears that there has been an airworthiness defect in the control system on an aeroplane. I don't know how much information I'm going to have ready for next week, but at least I'll be able to describe a little bit of the what happened and the evidence we've got so far. All right, so good night everybody, and hopefully I'll be able to get this up on YouTube shortly.